Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls. I'm Bruce McDonald, and this is the Talamanca Review. It's 9:08 p.m. on Thursday, the 10th of October, and had a nice day. Another day, another sauna, and I'm just going to do a walkabout today, where I talk about whatever comes into my mind, which I should be able to do for 50 or 55 minutes. Glasses are steaming up because I'm still a little hot from the sauna. I love the sauna. So simple. Just old propane tank. Cut a hole in the side, put hinges on it, put a little handle, but when it gets so hot you can't really grab the handle directly. So you got to use a stick or something to pull it out. You get your coals going and a little bit of flame. And then what happens is the top of the propane tank, it's metal, it gets really, really hot. You got stones up there and they get hot too. And then you just pour a little bit of water around. And then if you want to do a 10-minute sauna, I pour enough water in there because it's, what is the one that got concave or convex? I don't know, but the bowl of the propane tank, it forms a little bowl, so the water kind of gathers there. And then the whole time you're taking the sauna, the steam is coming off because the red hot coals burning inside are just and just shooting off this steam, right? So it's kind of a steam and a sauna at the same time. I guess, you always use water in a sauna, so there's nothing particularly new there. And I just love doing this. It's just like become a daily ritual that I once you get used to taking a sauna every day, you can't even believe you lived without it. I mean, it's literally that relaxing and that therapeutic. And the sort of like in the near dark, I just keep one little tea candle lit, and there's a door that closes, so it's pretty dark in there, and then you got the fire, and there's a little crack around the door in the propane tank where you can see the red-orange hot cinders, coals, and you can see the flame, and it's just absolutely beautiful, as is every day up here now. I don't often, when I do my podcast, I look out at the world. I don't tell you about the world I'm living in. Whatever's going to happen, I don't think that this little mountain pueblo will even notice hardly. Nobody has TV up here. Well, they do, but they watch a couple local channels, right? Costa Rican local channels, watch their news. Few sitcoms they do. I mean, it's a small country, right? There's only 4.5 million people. It's very interesting to live in a country this small, population-wise. Like, the population of this entire country is only about 65 or 70% of the population of the city I lived in, which was Toronto, the Greater Toronto area. So after you're here a while, you know a lot of people. It's got a very small town feel. Everybody knows everybody, or they know of you. And that's an interesting feeling. It's an interesting way to live. So I'm kind of moving in the opposite direction of the world. I'm going into a kind of cultivated small town or village life, pueblo life, barrio life. And there's really nothing that could happen. I mean, I probably don't have enough food planted, if the food prices got out of control or anything, but I mean, that could be remedied fairly easily. I mean, if it came to it and all I had to do to survive was forage, then I would just forage, right? And there's all kinds of food in the rainforest. There's just wild fruit trees in there. I got a lemon tree and an avocado tree planted last week. I had a friend leave. He left yesterday. He was here for about a month. He came after Bob left. I've had somebody with me, so for nine of the 10 months so far this year. Like, so from January right to, October 9th, yesterday. With very few breaks, I've had somebody staying with me. Whether it's my son, my friend from New York, the super soldier, my friend in Costa Rica who was just here, or Bob. It's been a very different year for me, 2024. I'm usually up here alone. My son comes for 3 months every year, and he kind of partly grew up here. Started coming up here when he was just 18 to work on the construction and stuff, and so he's kind of like really welcome here. And there's a lot of everywhere you go, there's like things to learn. Okay? Like little, I don't know how you'd say them, like little things to learn. And one of the things that I'm having to learn here is how to get along with people. Now, it's not that I don't get along with people. I always have gotten along with people. When I make a true friend, they're in my life forever. We may not see each other all the time. We may live great distances apart, but I never really lose contact with my real friends. And I pick up real friends every decade of my life. I picked up real friends in my teens. I had one call me the other day, about a month and a half ago, 2 months ago. A fellow I've known since the 7th grade, and I hadn't spoken to him other than text for quite a while. And he just called up one night. He was in his backyard. He lives on a lake. He retired. He's the same age as me, 58. And he had a campfire going, and he just had a few beers, and he said, "I'm going to call Bruce." I sometimes put these podcasts up on Facebook, and a lot of my Facebook friends have known me, since I was a kid. I grew up with them in Ottawa. And you have to understand that the person I am now is completely different than the person I was growing up back then. Like, none of these people I grew up with have the foggiest idea of my commitment to an inner life, meditation, my paranormal experiences, Stardust Ranch. Like, this is a whole side of my life they know nothing about. And I sometimes think, what they must think if they click on one of these podcasts that I either put up from the YouTube page or from my Substack and watch it. They must just think that old Bruce has gone completely crazy. You got to understand, I think that those of you who live in Canada will understand this. I'm not sure if the analogy carries over to the United States, but there's not a tremendous amount of imagination comes out of capital cities, people raised in capital cities. So it's a certain vibration and a certain upbringing. Because if you're living in a capital city, you're either a minister of parliament or somebody in the House of Representatives or the Congress in the United States, and you keep a home in your riding or the electoral zone that elected you. So Rand Paul would have a home in Kentucky, and then he would probably keep an apartment in Washington for when Congress is in session. Same thing in Ottawa. So we have, I think, just about 278, somewhere around there, ministers of, members of parliament, MPs. And, obviously they come from all over Canada. And then there's the core people that live there. And those are all the sons and daughters of either Royal Canadian Mounted Police officers, like intelligence officers, which would be the Canadian FBI. But when I was growing up, the RCMP was also the intelligence arm of Canada. We had not yet formed the Canadian Secret Intelligence Service, CSIS. And so you've got those guys, a lot of guys I grew up with. Their dads were real big muckety-mucks in the Royal Canadian Mounted Police. Then you've got all kinds of people working in the Federal Civil Service, anywhere from a low-level secretary to, a globe-trotting economist working for the Canadian State Department, like my father. And you got DOD there, the Department of Defense, the Canadian DOD, Canadian Department of Defense. And so you have children raised by families that are just embedded in the national infrastructure. And it doesn't produce a lot of creativity. Okay? So if any of you know the comedian Norm Macdonald, he comes from Ottawa. His brother went on to be a senior correspondent with the Canadian Broadcasting Corporation, traveling all over the world as a reporter. Very good reporter. But just the literal and diametric opposite of Norm. Super serious Ottawa guy. And Norm was one of those personalities that reacted to being raised in Ottawa. Like, fuck this shit. I'm just going to tell jokes and be funny. I'm going to be a comedian. Dan Aykroyd comes from Ottawa. Original cast member of Saturday Night Live, going all the way back to the 70s. Margaret Atwood, who wrote The Handmaid's Tale, born and raised in Ottawa. But she went to university in Toronto and left when she was in her late teens, right? I left Ottawa when I was 19. I lived there on my own for 3 years in an apartment after leaving home at 16, or rooming houses. And then I just picked up and I moved to Toronto on my own. And that part of my life is sort of brilliantly captured in God as an Economist. Right there, yeah. It's very interesting being a writer because it's what you lay down when you tell stories, like really tell stories, like work at it and rewrite them and get them to a permanent state so the language and the story will last, it'll survive and be readable in 15, 20, 25, 100 years. A lot of work goes into it, a lot of psychic energy, and it ends up being a kind of spiritual photo album of your life. And I say spiritual photo album because you capture all of your feelings and memories from when you were that age. So God as an Economist captures how I saw life completely at 20 and 21 years old, which is like 37 years ago. There it is again, God as an Economist. And so it also references my upbringing in Ottawa as well. It's very interesting, And then, I went to Toronto, waited tables and bartended, and then I ended up getting into a really good university program. I got my degree, and then I went to Taiwan. Lived there for just under 2 years. Learned Mandarin very quickly. I could speak relatively fluent Mandarin. And that changed my worldview considerably. Considerably. I cannot overstate the value of living abroad to round out your education and your understanding of the world. Because when you immerse yourself in another culture long enough that you start to behave like people from that culture, then what happens is you sort of recast your gaze upon your birth culture, and you look at everything you took for granted growing up in that culture. And you go, why do we do that? And Asia's quite dramatic. It's like, you think about everything. Who the hell invented a knife and fork for eating? Just impaling large pieces of meat or pinning down large pieces of meat so you can cut them with a table saw, which is what a steak knife is, Whereas in China, they just do everything completely differently. They cut the meat into bite-sized portions, eat with chopsticks. It teaches you a lot. That's not the best example because you can get used to using chopsticks even in Canada. But believe me when I tell you that when you live in a foreign country, there's a lot of things you think about. There's a lot of things that you cast your mind upon, right? Grab a coffee here. I was going to do the Walkabout podcast a little bit earlier. Actually, I was going to do a different podcast, but I had a bunch of material, all sort of lined up and everything. I had video and I had a topic and everything, but how many times can I say the same thing? They're trying to kill you, man. I mean, how many times, literally, how many times can I say the same thing? I don't know. It could not be any clearer now. And other people are starting to say the same thing too. That this is the attempt to kill Western society. And again, when you've known this as long as I've known it, and I've known it quite a while that this moment was coming, I didn't know exactly how it would happen. I couldn't have predicted the pandemic. Nothing like that. I couldn't have predicted burning down food processing, stuff like that. That's not how spiritual intuition works. You don't get the details. That's more of a psychic ability. Spiritual is you either see the spirit of God somewhere, which is growth and celebration and love of life, or you don't. And then you come to understand what's blocking that flow of energy. And then you determine whether it's incidental, deliberate, or combination of both. And then you map out what the effects of that are going to be over 2 years, 5 years, 10 years, 15 years. And then you just sort of figure it out, right? And that's how it works. And then if your heart comes to know it to be true, you'll act, right? I have a lot of very mixed feelings about what's going on now. Very, very strange and contradictory feelings. I don't know how to feel about this, the attempt to end Western civilization. I don't know that they're going to succeed. I think that too many people are catching on. Unless there's more going on with the medical regime than I know. But that would mean that all the whistleblower doctors are just next level plants in this plan. And I'm not cynical enough to carry it out that far. I can't see it going that far. I think people like Dr. McCullough and people like him are telling the truth. So it seems to me like people are catching on. And this is an unforgivable thing. It's really an unforgivable thing. And everything certain people could see 10, 15 years ago and tried to warn people about and got mocked for it, it's all being highlighted now under a kind of a spotlight if you look at it closely, right? Like, one example of what I'm talking to you about is the relationship between the United States and Israel. You know, the work I've done on the Talamanca Review on materialism is really important, because the materialism is in the hands of somebody debating or arguing the opposite position of me, a person who sees materialism as the advancement of a society. And there's many people who do. You know, Douglas Murray, the verbose British gay commentator, Jordan Peterson. You know, it's very interesting that when you study the people who've come out in support of Israel, they all basically lean in one camp, and that is that materialism is the advancement of the human race. That we are the most inventive people, we are the most creative people, we are the most industrious people, we are the most productive people. The whole world is jealous of us. The argument is very easy to make at a certain level of consciousness. When your consciousness expands and when you bring more of God or life, those are synonyms to me, right? And life is an internal expression. Life has an internal expression. It's not just external experiences, like waking up and seeing the sunset, or feeling the wind on your face as you're walking through a mountain path. That's physical life, but there's an internal life as well. And I mean an objective internal life. And when you start to understand that, that's when you start to understand how dangerous materialism is. And it also becomes a litmus test for who's lit up on the inside and who isn't. So Jordan Peterson is not a lit up human being. A very smart man, very well-read man, a very well-reasoned personality and position on the world, very rational man. Some might say moral. I might debate that. I think he has a very flawed sense of what morality is. Hey man, it's just my opinion. It's the Talamanca Review, and I'm Bruce McDonald. You know, don't get me wrong, when Jordan nails it out of the park on a topic I agree with him on, it's like, way to go, brother, you know? When he first stood up to the language police mandating these ridiculous gender dysphoria pronouns and put all his life on the line and everything, I went, way to go, man. You know, way to go. But it's like that Harvey Dent line in The Dark Knight, right? You know, if the hero lives long enough, he'll become the villain. Or something like that. Douglas Murray is another one. Psychoanalysis itself and psychology itself, in my opinion, and I'm just some guy that lives in an earthbag house, right? But in my opinion, it's pretty much bunk. Okay? If you're telling somebody that their thinking processes are affecting the outcomes in their life and they're not planning goals and going through the difficulty of realizing those goals, you know, if that's how you're counseling people, like a Jordan Peterson, well, what that tells me is you have no idea where thoughts come from, do you, buddy? Right? Like, I cannot stress this enough, and this may be the entire reason the Talamanca Review exists. Literally, everything is spiritual. We don't even really have thoughts. You would be better off, this is not a one-to-one correlation, but nonetheless, you would be better off regarding everything that comes into your consciousness, into your head, into your thought stream, as a spirit, as opposed to a thought that you cultivated. Okay? That's how completely spiritual we are. And that's what meditation teaches you. And I appreciate where the Christians are coming from, but I don't think they quite understand it either. You know, how everything is spiritual. You know, you don't have to wait for something to move across a desk paranormally. Oh, it's a demon. You know, that's so far down the manifestation stream. It's irrelevant. Everything is spiritual. Everything you think, everything you want. You know, I was up here one night, and you know, Bob and I got in the habit of three nights a week or so, we would watch a movie from the top 100 list on the International Movie Database, IMDb. You know, so we watched a lot of really good movies. We watched The Seven Samurai, a bunch of stuff. And he had one suggestion of a movie to watch, and it wasn't on the IMDb top 100 list. I knew about the movie, but I thought it was stupid when it came out, and I never bothered to watch it. And the movie is The Adjustment Bureau with Matt Damon. And if you've seen it, you know what I'm talking about. But it posits a world in which our fate is entirely mapped out for us by invisible forces. A very interesting conceptual movie. But Bob said, look, we need to watch this. And so I watched it with him. And when the movie was over, he looked at me and he goes, Bruce? I said, yeah. He said, that's nonfiction. That's how it all works. I said, really? He said, yeah. Now, I was about 60-70% there. But like 100% of everything that goes on in our lives is spiritual. Like the impetus for it is spiritual. Okay? And I know that sounds extreme, but it's true. Okay? So an eating disorder is usually entities around a person craving food through that person's body. Okay? Tobacco has spirits associated with it. A lot of spirits associated with tobacco. Okay? Marijuana has a spirit associated with it. Okay? Lust has a spirit associated with it, or spirits associated with it. Okay? Almost everything that goes on in our lives, except for the unconditional care for the things we love, like our children when they're young, our spouses, especially when they're vulnerable and they need us, those come from our true self, because our soul, as soul, we are love. Soul is love. Okay? So the metaphor for losing your soul, I mean, having your astral body stolen is an occult practice, but that's not your soul. So a lot of times when you watch movies and stuff, oh, he traded his soul. He gave his soul to the devil. No, the devil will generally just consume your astral body because there's an energy there that that entity wants if you're willing to give it up. But the soul is just the unit of perception. It has no real form, by the way, not even light. It has no form. Okay? And it loves. And most of us get to know our souls from the things that need our love, like our children. Some people come into contact with their soul through a pet, right? So you can't lose your soul, but you can lose your soul. And what that means is you lose the ability to love. You can't love anymore. You're too banged up, you're too paranoid, you're too miserable, you're too wounded. And this cycle of love shuts down in your life. And when that happens, the spirits get stronger. Smoke more, drink more, jerk off more, watch more TV, right? Because you've got nothing grounding you. So the spirits just have a field day with you. Because believe it or not, around each and every one of us is a small army of spirits. Each and every one of us. And they want to do things through our bodies. And many, many times it's your own ancestors. Many people get done in. So let's take something like, science now acknowledges something called hereditary alcoholism or hereditary addiction. Okay? There's no scientific basis for this. They want to make it all sound scientific, right? Like it's genetic, it's this, it's that. No, man. I mean, if you come from Scottish or Irish stock like I do, you're dealing with 20, 25 generations of drunkenness. What do you think those ancestors on the other side who are sitting on the astral want more than anything? They want a drink. They want a beer. Hey, look, Bruce McDonald's in incarnate, our great-great-great-great-great-great-great-great-great-great-great-grandson. Let's see if we can get him to drink and drink with him through his consciousness. This is how it works. This is the spiritual life revealed. Okay? And every genetic line, Scottish, Irish, Polish, Russian, Italian, Greek, Chinese, every line has spirits and ancestors. Some cultures honor those ancestors, like the Chinese. Big ancestor worship culture. Okay? You shouldn't worship your ancestors. Your ancestors should worship you while you're in the body. If you have a proper bloodline, your ancestors want you to grow your consciousness, because if one person in the bloodline reaches God consciousness, the whole bloodline is lifted up. It's the way it works. You're never going to read this anywhere. Everything I'm telling you, I learned the hard way. Okay? That's the way it works. For those of you who haven't read The Devil in Us, A Memoir of You and Me, there's one thing I said in the book. I'm not sure if people caught on to what I was saying. Okay? When I was thrown out of my house at 16, taken out by the police, I pretty much had to quit going to school, so I never finished high school. And I went to work in restaurants as a busboy. I wasn't old enough to serve alcohol yet. You have to be old enough to drink, which is 19 in Ontario, to serve alcohol. I was 16, so I worked as a busboy. I rented a one-bedroom apartment in Ottawa. Okay? And I was 16 years old. I rented the exact apartment I was conceived in 17 years earlier. There must be... Ottawa's a city of about 1 million people, by the way. And when I was 16 in 1982, it was probably a city of about 600,000 or 700,000. Okay? It's not a small city. It's not like there's only a small handful of apartments to rent. But I ended up moving into not only the building I was conceived in, but the exact apartment on the 3rd floor my parents rented when they first came to Ottawa, and I was conceived in that apartment. What are the chances? You're starting to see what I'm trying to describe here with this adjustment bureau analogy? Okay? If you want to figure out the world, figure out yourself, because you are the world. You are your world. Your world was cast for you before you were born. And you don't really get free will until you have a meaningful relationship with the divine. The rest of the time, you're just going through a series of events that were pre-planned before you were born, to pay back debts you owe, to learn lessons you need to learn, and to continue your growth cycle. But those growth cycles are so banged up now, right? So one of the things that happens in a cycle like the one we're going through, so we're closing an entire cycle of time now, okay? And this means that everything we think and believe is ending now. All the stuff that has carried us for the last 2,000 years, 2,600 years, which is the time of one astrological cycle of the 12. We're in a bigger cycle than that, but I'm just going to describe this one. So all that stuff is ending now. This is why everything's being burned to the ground, and this is why people who are attached to that stuff are having a difficult time flowing with what's going on. Because the internal landscape from which we live is all changing. It's not just the external landscape, right? Which is one of the reasons all of the sacred institutions and way of perceiving the world that we cultivate in the West are being taken down. And you can blame the World Economic Forum, you can blame whoever you want, but those are just human beings acting as agents for forces larger than themselves, conscious or unconscious. This isn't a particularly gratifying episode of the Talamanca Review for dyed-in-the-wool conspiracy theorists. Don't get me wrong, I believe in conspiracies, but what we're going through now is much bigger than a conspiracy. Much bigger. It's huge, actually. Huge. And everyone you know in the world putting out a face, projecting a face, a personality, like everything's okay, and this includes our leaders, like, Justin Trudeau and Harris and Biden. They're just projecting a face, but they don't have a clue what's going on. It's bigger than them too. Okay? Nobody's in control of this. Not the World Economic Forum, not the Inner Earth, not the extraterrestrials, nobody. Nobody. We're coming up to that event that Terence McKenna tried to define when he coined the phrase time wave zero. Okay? An event, a singular event, whose magnitude, the magnitude of which is so impactful on the human race that it's more impactful emotionally, mentally, physically, spiritually, in every way. It's more impactful on the human race than all the events of the last 2,000 years that have preceded it. Or, if I remember what McKenna said correctly, all events in recorded time preceding it. Okay, so this is all the European wars, the Napoleonic Wars, English colonialism, World War I, World War II. Bigger than all of it, not bigger than each and every one of the events singularly, bigger than all of them combined. And you think of everything we've done, The moon landing may be false. I'm inclined to think it's false. Or it was done with assistance, one or the other. But there it is. all the invention, the computers we've invented, everything we've done, everything that the human race has done in recorded history, the Chinese, the Africans, Europeans, Middle Easterners, the Greeks, the Italians, Rome, all of it. The event horizon, time wave zero, that Terence McKenna is describing is an event that dwarfs the impact of all previous events combined. And the way he said it, one could conclude that it's not an extinction event, because the way he said it suggests that human beings are going to be left to digest what happens. We're not going to be wiped out, per se. Very fascinating. I can't think of what it would be, other than God himself appearing on the earth. Right? I don't mean to assign a gender to God, right? It's just for the utility of language. There's no other way to say it in smooth conversation. But this life is so beautiful, and it's all in all its measure when you live it right. And if your life is a misery now and you're in a negative state of mind all the time, you haven't lived your life right. Okay? You haven't been broken. You haven't learned how to ask for help. You haven't learned how to open up, which are important things. So this is what's going on. It's an unbelievable and unparalleled event, and you can almost feel it now. Even with no precognition of what it might be, you can almost feel it. It could be the realization of the spiritus mundi, the collective unconscious, but the awakened unconscious, not just a bunch of dormant fantasies about having sex with your mother and all this Freudian nonsense. Freud was a psychic terrorist, was an evil, evil man, as so many of these Jewish thought leaders have been in the 20th century. And I don't mean to pick on them, but they've been very, very corrupted by the Kabbalah. Very corrupted by the Kabbalah. Okay, because the heart is the most important thing, not the knowledge, not the magic, none of that stuff. It's the heart. That's what matters. And if you lose that, you've lost everything. Everything. There's no amount of cars or houses or money or jets or women or men that can replace that. And the people who made those choices are going insane right now. I talk to Kat, not all the time, but we have 1 or 2 good conversations a month for an hour or 90 minutes. She keeps me up to date on what's going on in the satanic underworld in Belgium. They're coming apart. Like a suit tailored in Hong Kong, they're coming unstitched. Okay? So this reckoning we're going through, and don't take joy in this. There but for the grace of God go us, right? Because 99 out of 100 people born into these bloodlines never get out. I was lucky to get out of my bloodline, and it wasn't even a fully satanic bloodline. Okay? I was very lucky. So I don't judge. You know? That's why I can talk to all these people, and that's why they like me, is I don't judge. Right? Because I know there but by the grace of God goes me. That could just as easily have been me. Okay? Killing people by pushing buttons or giving orders, and the sex parties, the power. It could just as easily have been me in another incarnation. I don't think I'd be anything but Justin Trudeau if I was born the son of Pierre Elliott Trudeau. I don't think I'd end up being anything but Barack Hussein Obama if I was raised by the whore he was birthed by and the piece of shit father who raised him. It's really not their faults. And getting rid of this anger and finger pointing is a big part of what we all have to do to get through what's coming. Okay, because if you're still in a judgment state of mind, whatever this energy that's coming up on us, I have a feeling that what's going to happen is judgment energy is going to be turned on the person who's judging. And it's going to be very, very bad. Right? This is an excellent time to reread the Gospels. I think the message of Christ is so relevant to now, like the first quarter of the 21st century, than in any other quarter century, of which there would have been 20 centuries. So there would have been 80 quarter centuries since Christ died. Okay, 25 years is a quarter of a century. There have been 20 centuries times 20 by 4. It's 80. See, I can do math. But this quarter century we're in now, 2000 to 2025, the Gospels have never been more relevant. This is probably why so many people are converting to Christianity. Former atheists or lazy spiritual or religious people. Okay? I myself don't particularly need the Gospels. I got my connection with the Holy Spirit another way. But you can do it any way that is right for you as long as you get it. But this quarter century, it's all the Gospels. If you follow the recipe in the Gospels now, if you can truly get to that Christ state of consciousness, where you don't judge, you don't point fingers, you don't do any of these things, you'll be okay. And not only okay here, but okay there as well, which is really important because there's far less difference between here and there than you might imagine. Far less difference between here and there than you might imagine. I like walkabouts. I never know where I'm going to end up or what I'm going to end up talking about. I like walkabouts. It's just this crazy free-form jazz podcast. I mean, I do build on stuff I said in previous podcasts, but they just go where they're going to go. The most important thing to think about now is your spiritual state, not your material state. If you're worried about losing your life savings, well, then you have material attachments that are going to be agonizing to get through in this phase. All right? The divine always provides. You know? I've been an oddity to my family. You know, my father died in 2022, June of 2022. We got a lot closer near the end of his life. But I've been an oddity in my family since like day one. It's like I was born in the wrong family. Completely different energy signature than anyone else in the family. My father had a similar energy signature, but my mother changed his vibration and signature. And, you know, they're very much like plan for everything, right? Get yourself, we call what you in America call a 401k. We call that an RRSP in Canada, a Registered Retirement Savings Plan. Yeah, I hate to tell you, but those are all gone. Okay, that's why they're killing all the people. They want that money. Okay, they ran the West into the ground, and they need to get the money now. And that's why they're killing all these people. You'll see the inheritance taxes come in. I think, like even Trump will bring in inheritance taxes probably. He'll leave some loophole so his kids and grandkids don't have to pay it. They all do that. In Canada, it was done by Trudeau's father. He brought in an inheritance tax and left a loophole so Justin never really had to work, except as a part-time drama teacher and pedophile and half-assed prime minister of a minority government. But he's never really had to work because they left loopholes in the law that they don't really explain to the average person. But they're going after everything now. So you may as well get used to it, and they're probably going to get their way. There's no amount of resistance is going to work at this point because it's such an interlinked and intertwined system that they can do everything they want now. Look how easily they shut down that trucker protest. Yeah, cut off their bank accounts. Freeze the bank accounts of anybody who helps them, gives them money. Okay? Pretty effective. Shut it down pretty quick, didn't it? Torment the leaders for years in legal proceedings, which they've done to the 2 or 3 principal leaders of the trucker protest. They're still tied up in court like 2.5 years later. 2 years later, still tied up in court. Still not done their civil and criminal cases. That's what they do. Lawfare. What does it leave? If you want to think freely and express yourself freely, how do you do it? You have to do it from outside their system, because if they have any controls over you, they're going to exercise those controls. Okay? Do you really, for a moment, think that people capable of mass murder through medical malpractice are concerned about your savings, your retirement savings? If they don't care about your life, what do you think they think about your money? Well, they think it's theirs, and they're just planning ways to get it now, is what they're doing. It's the world we live in. If anybody wanted to call in, I would take a call now. I think I'm set up for this. Yeah, I've got the Mac OS audio capture on. Set up my headset. And if you're set up for this time, though, if you're set up for it, if you saw it coming and you're sort of set up for it, yep, headset's on. So if you want to call, just call Skype. There it is, 864-810-1039, or Seen That Tinker 1. I'm particularly eager to talk to the people who have read God is an Economist or The Stolen Child. Okay? My fiction. If you've prepared yourself for this moment, or if you were spiritually aware that it was coming, it's no big deal, man. For me, this whole thing is going down the way famines went down in Africa in the late 80s. When you'd stay up till 1:30 or 2 o'clock in the morning in the infomercial, the Christian infomercial, usually with Sally Struthers from All in the Family, who played Meathead's wife. She would come on TV and beg for money, and they would show the bloated bellies of the children in Africa from malnutrition, intestinal parasites bloating out their bellies. Can you? And you remember we grew up looking at that, and it was like it may as well have been Mars. Right? It seemed like another world altogether. And while all that was going on, we were just doing our thing, Fast Times in Ridgemont High came out. Sean Penn's first major movie after Bad Boys. All kinds of stuff, man. That's how what's happening in North America is looking to me now. It's like a TV show. The only difference is I know actors in this program. So it's a bit more emotional. And, but if you've prepared for it and you're able to weather it, then it's just this sort of TV show that's going on in the background. Really strange, man. Like really, really strange. Weird is what it is. weird. Well, I guess nobody's going to call. So, I guess we'll call it a show for tonight. That's another Walkabout. I'm Bruce McDonald, and this has been the Telemanker Review.